My name's Avinash. I'm one of the co-founders of Quicksand and Unbox and Antarix. These are three different practices, which I can tell you about some other time. But in general, they're all interdisciplinary practices, heavily believing in the power of people-centered thinking to inform all sorts of innovation, whether it's video games or public systems and everything in between. What John referred to is actually the first time I met John in person. My first encounter with John actually happened in 1999 at Doors of Perception East at NID when I was pretty much like one of the students here, watching a conference very much like this, hosted by him, and that left a huge impression on me. And then my next encounter was in 2008 when we had the pleasure of being invited to France to document bicycle commerce in India and make a small installation out of it. So we came up with the name Velo Wala, obviously being in India, Wala and Velo from France, meaning like cycles or off a bicycle. And the idea was to create a transmedia resource that could help inform and excite people about the possibilities of bicycle-based commerce. Obviously, being in India, this is not anything unusual at all. And back in 2008, it definitely wasn't. Maybe it is nowadays with the way cities are going. But the idea, all I did was I just traveled across Delhi and Bangalore and maybe Lucknow when I was there for a small break and just documented people selling things. And the format was very simple. I made a website where with these postcards, each postcard had long, short, and then details of what's being sold. Pretty simple. And a short description. The main idea around this was to raise awareness about the viability and flourishing nature of bike-based commerce, which, again, growing up in India, you don't think too much about this, but in the context of where we are today in 2024, this appears to be super important, not just for us, but for the whole world, and maybe for us as well in the coming years, but definitely all across the West and the global North, so to speak. Some of the examples here, now looking back, are actually fascinating in a very simple way, and you realize that in India and also not just in India, but also all across the global South, we've always had complex products and services and experiences coming to our doorstep on all days of the week for free in a very affordable manner. And that is what the entire world is aspiring for right now. But however, our smart cities are trying to get all of this out, which is quite surprising. And also some examples like a kind of a product service mix and repair, so you can get a new piece of furniture kind of built for yourself, but if you have something that's broken, you can also get it repaired. And in some sense, challenging this perception that such kind of commerce is backward looking. I think growing up in India in the 90s and early 2000s, as a designer, kind of, let's say, a product designer, we've always believed that this is shit and it represents backward thinking, it represents unevolved design thinking, unformed industrial design and so on. But actually, again, now looking back on all of this, it just seems super sophisticated, sometimes dangerous like the helium balloons or the gas cylinders, but nevertheless extremely exciting like the gas cylinder over there. But also things like posters and frames. Now, how many of you have posters at home that you will never get framed because you're too lazy to go to the framer, right? And there's someone who'll actually come to you and do it at your place. And actually, this stuff doesn't happen anymore. Like the neighborhoods I grew up in Delhi, don't actually have these anymore. And that's actually a very important sign of how transient some of this is, how precious some of this is, and also increasingly as I look back on this project, thanks to John, who constantly reminds me every few years that it's one of his favorite projects, which gives me hope and excitement. It also makes me realize that these are forms of urban heritage, and these are forms of heritage, and we are losing this heritage, right, every day. It also helps us kind of understand that bicycle vendors are part of a very complex metabolism. If you think of cities as living spaces, as ecosystems, then these are part of that metabolism, and these are also part of the social innovation of that city, because each one of these is extremely people-centered, it's extremely based on notions of place, of identity, of everyday functionality, of complex supply chains, and so on and so forth. All the stuff that you would like to think theoretically about in a complex manner exists in each of these carts. And also, again, everything from food, beverage, knives, sharpening. And another term that I actually got to know because of John, which is ternary thinking, which was on one of his blog posts about this project many years back, and I found it. And this idea of finding a third option, looking beyond binaries, which India in general represents in each and everything that we do, everything that we have, but it's somehow something that is not a part of the current design vocabulary. It's not part of the foundations of graphic design or industrial design that we learn about today. It's not part of the smart city planning. It's not part of anything that's modern in India right now. And therefore, something that's that natural to us, which is ternary thinking, it's something that the entire world is now trying to move towards, exists already within these kind of like ramshackle carts at times. And also from a time begone, obviously you can have a PCO, a phone booth in 2008, which would be, yeah, that's just crazy anyway. That's, again, a form of like telecommunication heritage to start with. And also things like, milk and stuff. I don't know if some of you remember this kind of contraption with, which I think fascinated a lot of kids back then. The other idea here, which is also important for what we're talking about, is this idea of a distributist kind of economic perspective, which is an alternative to both capitalism and socialism, and essentially identifies itself as the idea that assets should be widely owned and not concentrated. Again, something that is in some sense kind of ideal in today's world, but also already existed in these kind of systems. And also, when you look at the social aspect of some of this, I love this one. It's just like super amazing. It feels like something out of like a Ghibli animation or something. And also, again, great examples of services, which, I would love for a mechanic to come to my house and my car is a flat, right? It's just almost impossible anymore. And, this makes you think. And also this whole idea of the global relevance of something that happens right outside my house only strikes me today when I'm in my mid-40s thinking about, where are we going with design? Where are we going with cities? What am I doing as a designer? Then it hits me that, hey, actually, what we have here in terms of low-impact commerce, and not from the global south, I would say the local south, is actually of immense global relevance. It has everything in it to change the nature of metropolitan cities around the world. It can change global economies. It can change the car industry. It can change everything. And it's all there in a small, humble situation such as this. We also used that opportunity to do something we've done actually a lot. And in fact, this project is the one that started off for Quicksand. For some of you who know our studio, in 2008, we were 3 years old. And this was maybe the first project where we decided to take the ethnographic work that we did and convert it into art. So we worked with an art intern in our studio to make these beautiful postcards, which were then distributed in France at the exhibition. And in some sense, this project ended up encapsulating a big part of what Quicksand is today, like in 2024. And I think, obviously, I should thank John for that. And to keep things kind of going, and maybe just like 5 minutes more and I know we're running short of time. More recently, I've been doing a project called Elsewhere in India. If you go to the canteen, there's a Quicksand slide where these kind of cyborgs and kind of futuristic images. That's from a project called Elsewhere in India, which happens in the year 2079. And the project looks at an India where culture has almost become extinct, which seems crazy to think about, but I think if everyone thought about it seriously, you would see that it's true, it's already happening, and there might be a time 30, 40 years from now when what we call culture and heritage today might not exist or would be on its last legs. So we're in that world, and in that world, we've been exploring like different aspects of that world, and when John reached out for today, I thought that it would be a nice way to spin off some thinking around what the future for Velo Walas could be like. Of course, 2079 is just a figure for a far future. We don't need to get too scientific about what technologies might exist and stuff. I just did a quick AI kind of speculative design fiction kind of a thing, so that's why there are lots of spelling mistakes in case you guys are wondering. But just to give you a quick, I just had like 30, 40 concepts, but just to go through ideas. So, and we're imagining a world where cars have stopped existing. The EU's finally gone off. And we're looking at a place where Velo Walas exist and bicycle commerce is in abundance. So this is like a daily nutrition kind of a Velo Wala. For example, even if you look at places like Nigeria and stuff, you'll have a lot of people who are selling energy potions on carts just like this, even today. We can look at the return of a cyber kiosk in a post-internet society, which most probably might be true. And therefore, we return to like 1999 with STD booths and ISD booths, but with small internet kiosks on restricted bandwidths and kind of like gray areas, essentially. We definitely look at like sanitation-based facilities on loos. I mean, there's a huge problem in India right now, even in music festivals and stuff around portal loos. So the idea that you could have traveling Velo loos could be an interesting one. We also looked at this idea of a seed cannon kind of a cycle, which can throw out like seeds of like native species while it's like traveling, and also like do like real-time tests on soil moisture and stuff like that. The role of like of extinct heritage, where all you have of a terracotta craftsperson is just an old archival film that you can project, and some kind of like small prototypes of what a craft used to be. So it's essentially not a place for selling terracotta, but it's a little museum, in fact, on wheels. We thought of a telemedicine cart in kind of harder to access areas where you could combine like, in some sense, high-tech and lo-fi, kind of like high art, lowbrow kind of a mix. Basically, arogya for people who are not from India means essentially removing disease, basically. Some kind of a cycle-based filtration system, which can also collect the air and then sell it. So again, all of these examples are based on some kind of bicycle commerce, kind of a starting point. Looking at just a simple charging shop on a cycle, which would be pretty useful even today, most probably. Like, I don't have charge on my phone right now. A classroom, given that schools and the education system is most probably disintegrating, small classrooms, which could, that's the whole class basically, maybe like 3 or 4 kids. A kind of a health diagnostics setup, given that last mile diagnostics in India, I mean, the startups are going to kill everything, and so will investors. So what we'll be left with is most probably people taking diagnostics into their own hands. A Velo-powered kino or a cinema hall for watching your favorite shows, or antiquated like films and stuff like that, with the cycles powering everything, and the younger people having to do it in the family. A kind of a Dabba Wala spin-off, where the Dabba Wala actually has these little drones. This is like, I don't like this so much, it's a little bit too futuristic, but it was fun to like just have it. A kind of an oxygen oasis, where you kind of produce like oxygen bags, and then you can sell those off as a service for a temporary kind of hit, if you want. There was a firecracker thing in the earlier photographs, but then now that there's obviously, firecrackers are terrible right now in today's day and age, but a kind of a silent firecracker system which uses like bioluminescence and creates like small format fireworks. A nanomedic using like some remnants of nanotechnology and Indian kind of ideas around constituents and so on. Definitely water would be a very precious commodity. For sale, working from a rickshaw, a more modern interpretation, which hopefully can happen soon. Kind of a hydroponic, sorry, there's another hydroponic one, but like essentially a small nursery, which again even happens today. You can buy plants on carts even today, so this is not a new idea at all. A kind of a repair velo for more advanced stuff, given that all we would have is the repair economy for technology in the future. We may not have any new economies around tech, and so the repair economy is the one that helps tech survive. And so therefore this would be a pretty abundant kind of a thing. Given that climate change will drown most of our cities, a way for mom and pop stores to survive in a simple way. E-waste velos, again, a big market in the future. Green lung velo, again, continuing the idea of oxygen and air, but something which has a bit more like processing power on the cycle. Makeup and cosmetics. This, I think, should happen right now. Just essentially taking makeup to people, like nails, etc., which would be amazing, I think, to have. A textile museum, I think there's a big market, could be a big market for museums in the future, which are on wheels. So this is just an idea for a small textile museum, something that could be interesting in a very local kind of a way. We also looked at, like, again, junk in general being a source. The few white-collar people who remain will continue living in their dream world, funded by investors in Bangalore. And they will also be in the reverse in the future. And then some kind of a gadget guardian. I think this is an interesting idea where we feel like, what if watch manufacture stops after 2035 completely? Then all you have is the watches of yesteryears. So how do you protect these? And like, low-cost smartphones are the only things that survive, and so on and so forth. So I think the idea of a gadget guardian, also like real-time water purification systems would be super important. Right now we just talk about desalination plants, but what you actually need are actually most probably very local desalination and water purification systems which can be mounted in such a manner. simple things like fish markets. I think we were talking about fridges in our previous group. Yep, almost there. And then kind of just public events running on Velos. I think that's just super important to have human-powered entertainment. I also do a lot of work in the electronic music scene, and I make video games, and I use a lot of Gen AI, like over here. And we spoke a bit about, I think the first speaker, did you speak about that? The environmental impact of Gen AI? Yes. So appreciating that, we do need like a way to like think about waste in a different way. There is an idea of the net negative of things versus the net positive of things. Can it ever even out? So can, for example, if we use generative AI for climate change, will the net negative of generative AI be lesser than the net positive of the climate change impact? Now, I think that applies to a lot of complex questions today. Most probably the answer is no. It won't make it justified. But anyway, thank you, John, for a huge part of my entire career, and thanks for having me here today. And Nandita, of course, as well. Thank you for having me. Cheers.